Hello viewers, welcome back to the Car Cave. Now, in my last video, I talked about the 987.2 generation of the Porsche Boxster, and I explained how it's the best budget mid-engine Porsche that money can buy. But in that video, I also mentioned the first generation Boxster, the 986, and talked about how it saved the Porsche brand. So I will leave a link to that video if you want to check it out. But that got me thinking. I have a 987.2, I love that car, it's a great car. But what is the 986 generation like? Well, thanks to a very kind gentleman who owns this 2000 Porsche Boxster, which is a 986 generation, we're going to find out. And we're going to answer the really important question of, is the 986 generation Boxster still worth buying in 2023? Now, this one, like I said, is a year 2000, so at the time of filming this video, it's still 2022, but by the time you see it, this car will be 23 years old. So how does it hold up? To find out, we're going to talk a little bit about the exterior, do a bit of a walk around, go through the interior and see how it's held up over the years. And thanks again to that gentleman, we're going to take it for a drive and see what it feels like over 2 decades later. Now, the exterior of this car is unmistakably Porsche, and that wasn't done on accident. See, at the time that this car was being designed and conceived back in the early 90s, late 80s, Porsche was having a bit of financial troubles. A lot of the cars that they were building and selling at the time had bespoke assembly lines. They didn't really share any parts, which was very costly and also cost the brand the ability to market the Porsche brand because none of the cars looked like a Porsche. With the Porsche Boxster, the new group of executives obviously changed that, and they changed that by creating a mid-engined convertible sports car that was at a lower price point than a 911, but still shared a lot of its components. Things like these egg-shaped headlights, the front fenders, the hood, a couple of other different body panels and interior components as well are all sourced from the 911. Now, this did save the Porsche brand because it brought production costs down, let them sell more cars for cheaper, while also promoting the brand because the Boxster looked very similar to the 911. Now, over the years, it's been 23 years, and it still is very recognizable as a Porsche. That's the great thing about buying into this brand. You don't really notice too much of a difference when you go older versus newer because they solidified their look. Now, I will say that when I first saw this car, I wasn't super crazy about the headlights, and I wasn't for many, many years, and it's a sticking point for this generation, both for the Boxster and for the 996, 911. They're looked at as the ugly duckling of the bunch, but over time, I think it's aged really well. I like how it looks. Definitely keeps that very iconic Porsche styling as you move along the side of the car. This really cool side intake for cooling the engine. And as we make our way to the back, it's a very simple rear end. There's not a lot going on. But overall, it's still a really good looking car. It still looks like a Porsche. It still has that exotic look without being in your face radical. And these wheels, of course, have that great classic look. So in my opinion, this 986 Boxster, it doesn't look all that different from my car to the untrained eye, but it's still a good looking car. Now, unfortunately, it has started raining, so we're going to switch into the interior, but that's good because that's what I wanted to do next. Now, the interior of this car is really where you start to notice that it's aged a little bit, right? I mean, a lot of the materials and buttons, they're very late 90s, early 2000s, and of course, technology is never the same, right? The technology yesterday is outdated today. So you start to notice that, this car's a little bit old. It does have a pretty cool digital display for climate control. Obviously has a radio. It's got a little compartment here for your phone. So this is the digital display. You've got a cool little compartment here that actually just happens to be the perfect size for a modern cell phone. So I wonder if Porsche knew about that. This one is a 5-speed manual. This car does come with either a 5-speed manual or a automatic Tiptronic gearbox with a torque converter, and this is really cool. You still have that very iconic central tachometer that you see in all Porsches. Key goes to the left, and the seats look pretty good, I would say. They've held up pretty well. When this car was released, it was released as a luxury car. It was released really as an entry-level Porsche, so it cost around $40,000 back in the year 2000. Now, in modern money, that's right around $70,000, so it wasn't a cheap car by any means, but you get what you pay for. 2 decades later, it's still held up pretty well. I mean, there's a little bit of fading on the plastic here and there, and some of the buttons might have their little symbols worn off, but for such an old car, it's held up really well. Now, it does have the similar system to my car, the 987.2, where you lock and unlock the doors with a single button. The convertible top is controlled here on the dashboard. I will say one thing that I do notice about this car compared to mine is there's quite a lot less headroom. I have maybe about an inch or two in my car if I'm sitting up nice and straight, and I have plenty of leg room, so when I release the clutch, I'm not necessarily hitting the steering wheel. But in this car, just to put my foot on the clutch, I do have to remove my leg and reattach it in a different configuration. But totally worth it for Porsche. Now, in my last video, I did mention briefly about the IMS bearing design on this, the 986 generation of the Porsche Boxster, and it carried over into the 987.1. Now, if you do any kind of research on pretty much any forum, you will get tons and tons of articles, information, and questions about the IMS bearing, and it will lead you to believe that as soon as you turn the car on, the IMS bearing will melt away like fresh cheese on a quesadilla. Well, I have the key right here, so we're going to test out that theory and see, is it really that bad? Now, this car has just over 100,000 miles, so presumably when I turn this key, if those forums are correct, this could get a little graphic. I guess they're wrong, which is good news because that means that now we can take this car for a drive. So let's go ahead and do that. Safety first, of course. Now let's see how this car holds up performance-wise. Windshield wipers work. Over 23 years. Now, as I said, this one is a manual transmission. You could get an automatic Tiptronic with a torque converter. I recommend getting the manual just because reliability-wise, I'm sure the torque converter is fine. But a manual just, I don't know, I'm more comfortable with a manual, so that's what I would get. Now, the 986 generation of the Boxster came originally in 1996 with a 2.5 liter flat six that made 201 brake horsepower. In the year 2000, which just happens to be the year of this car, that engine was bored out to 2.7 liters to produce 217 brake horsepower and around 192 pound-feet of torque. Now, that little power bump, actually you can kind of, it's not a slow car. It does 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, which is not, blisteringly fast by any means, but it's about the same speed that you would expect from a brand new Audi A3. Now, this car is in great condition, 103,000 miles, and it feels brand new. And that's the thing about Porsches. They're sports cars, yes, they're exotic, I guess, to some people as well, but they're drivable, they're usable. You're gonna find Boxsters of this generation with over 100,000 miles, with 200,000 miles, and that's perfectly normal because you can put miles on these cars, they will perform, they're going to be reliable. You really don't have a lot to worry about. And that's not something that you can say for a lot of brands, especially in the time period that this car was released. In the early 2000s, the late 90s, a lot of these performance cars were not very reliable. Things would break. That's not really the case with Porsche, and this car is proof of that. So is the 986 Boxster something that you should still be looking into in 2023? I would say yes. It still drives like a great sports car. If you do get one that has a little bit higher mileage, you don't really have to worry too much about the IMS bearing. And if you are worried, take it to a dealer, get a pre-purchase inspection, and have some peace of mind. The cars are coming in at such a great price point. To have a sports car, to have a Porsche, I think you really can't go wrong. Now, that's all I have for this video. I thank you so much for watching. Please leave me a comment below about what you think. Do you agree, disagree? Do you have a 986 Boxster? How's it held up over the years? Let us know below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It's a great way to show support for the channel, and I really appreciate it so I can continue to make videos like this one. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Take care.